Whoa, hey, I'm live. I don't do this thing very often. I hope it's working out okay. I've been on the YouTube an awful lot lately. I'm always on YouTube doing one thing or another, following lots of channels, enjoying some blacksmiths beating on metal and stuff like that. And lately in my feed, this guy who's got the same first name as me, and I've got a thing for guys with my first name, following Alex French Guy Cooking, following Alex Steele, the blacksmith, and suddenly there's this Alex Becker. Becker, last name of my best friend in high school. That's cool. Alex, my name. I'm totally game for it. But he is hating on the new Star Wars stuff. He's asking people to boycott the new up and coming Solo movie. Don't go see it. Kathleen Kennedy has ruined everything. And I just found myself writing a really long response, the second one to a video in 2 days. And I had to stop myself and say, do I really want this underneath his video where he's going to take the text and he's not going to know the tone of voice? Maybe he thinks I'm being sarcastic and misrepresenting the other side, or maybe he doesn't think I have the cred or whatever it is to be a proper Star Wars fan, because he doesn't think that real Star Wars fans are going to like the movie, because some of them are, in my opinion, really badly behaved human beings, and he's exemplifying some of that. I think he's just, like a lot of people, dug himself into a hole and doesn't want to take some certain medicine. Now, he's got a bunch of complaints on one of his videos that he's done about, stuff that was wrong with The Last Jedi and why it was a terrible movie and why you should boycott the Han Solo movie. And I'm not going to go through it point by point. I'm just going to go through what I posted or was going to post under his video. Just leave it here on my channel for me. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to talk about, just be showing you that, maybe, just maybe, I am possibly a legit Star Wars fan, because he's going to have some troubles with that. I was originally going to sign this thing off with something that you'll find if you dig through my channel. Some of my earliest posts, somebody who was the loser who recorded Stephen Kavanaugh's Starfighters in the Sky. I did that for Peter Mayhew back when he showed up at theforce.net, which is where I lived my whole life in 2000 and 2001, before the prequel trilogy absolutely stunk it up and made me not want to do Star Wars anymore. How much did I want to love the prequel trilogy? I wanted to love the prequel trilogy so bad that before episode 1 came out, I bought the screenplay and almost cried when I saw lines being given to the guy named Jar Jar Binks in this piece of crap. Those were bad movies. I don't mind this new stuff at all. And that's kind of what I get into in this comment that I'm going to get to here in a moment. Again, I love these Star Wars movies. I do. I went out and bought The Force Awakens when it came out on Blu-ray, even though it was totally available on Netflix. And my kids are like, why'd you go and do that? Don't mind me a little Clone Wars. Much at all. And yeah, I went and got the prequel trilogy, hoping that I could learn to love it if I watched it enough times. Never quite got there. Love the original trilogy. Love me some lightsabers. Don't call me somebody who's not a big fan of Luke Skywalker. That's, I think, 1, 2, 3 blue lightsabers to my 1 red. No purple, no yellow, none of that stuff. No, sir. I love the video games. Love me the video games. After I had a horrible time with the original Phantom Menace, I so much wanted to love this set of movies. I went out and bought Ari Salvatore's novelization. I loved Ari Salvatore. He tried so hard to make a silk purse out of a pig's ear when he wrote that. Used to hang the Ralph McQuarrie artwork on my wall, made sure my kids had the same artwork I had on my wall for their bedroom by going out and getting this book for them for Christmas a little while ago. I'm spending my thousands of dollars on Star Wars, I think. Possibly. Maybe. That's a very possible thing that I'm doing here. I might be the kind of person who is putting a little bit of money, I don't know, into the Star Wars. Could be. Maybe they want someone like me around. Maybe I'm not one of the people that is just a casual fan. Maybe. I don't know. Possibly. Oops, the wing came off of that. Maybe I am a casual fan. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe I'm just totally casual. Maybe I never owned a Star Wars role-playing game either. Maybe I never played it. Maybe none of that kind of stuff. Now, what did I have to say? He was upset that they're kind of, passing off the baton. They're ditching the old characters, treating Luke Skywalker like a punk is one of the things he's bad at. Luke Skywalker has always been treated back and forth in all of the material. Sometimes he's become a badass dark Jedi. Sometimes he's been a good guy. Sometimes he's ended up babysitting baby hugs and tugs, the Solo kids, as they become Jedis and they drink the Juma juice or whatever the heck it is. He's been thrown all over the place. I don't think his treatment here is that far bad or that far good. It's just what it is. It's an interesting direction they took it. And they did need to ditch some characters. They needed to get the old actors out. Why? Why did they ditch the old actors? Well, I seem to remember a certain movie. I think the title was Indy and the Flying Fridge. Maybe that's why. That kind of stuff was the irreparable damage of just too much time and Georgie Boy's BS prequels to his Star Wars movies getting in the way. I'm sorry that this Alex Becker guy hates that KK has killed his love of wrinkled heroes and awful story. Really, some genuinely awful stories there in the Star Wars canon that we got to just sort of bury and get past. And she's trying to turn the ship around. I'm glad that she's making some awesome catch while she's doing it. And this is one of the things that Alex Becker, successful businessman and multimillionaire, has got to say to Kathleen Kennedy, who doesn't know how to make a buck or something like that. He thinks that he knows how to fix her financial woes and turn Star Wars into the financial juggernaut that it should be. Now, is the fan response to The Last Jedi as bad as he seems to be trying to make it out to be, or is he using a little bias in the way he's talking about it? I can't really tell. Is TLJ, is The Last Jedi the worst mainline movie in Star Wars history? Hardly. Not by any kind of raw numbers, not by inflation-adjusted numbers, or by position within any kind of a Star Wars trilogy. You can look at it by all sorts of metrics. It's not a poorly performing movie at all. I'm going to look at the adjusted for inflation numbers. These are the ones that I got off of Box Office Mojo, and it doesn't include the foreign figures, but the foreign figures will only boost The Last Jedi when you compare it to, especially to the original trilogy, where the foreign markets just were not involved in the same kind of a way. So, with the inflation-adjusted numbers, The Empire Strikes Back, TESB, brought in only 55% the money that A New Hope did. Adjusted for inflation, Attack of the Clones brought in 59%. It actually did better than The Empire Strikes Back. Maybe R.A. Salvatore did manage to salvage and sell something when he made that novelization. Maybe, I hate saying it gets everywhere, didn't kill the movie completely or whatever else awful stuff. Maybe it was just Yoda being a total badass. I was at SIGGRAPH when they unveiled that, doing my video game programming thing. Dude, that was awesome. I loved seeing that stuff. There was some good stuff in Attack of the Clones. Just the story absolutely was a snooze fest. And the I'm trying to be stuffy and Jedi are stuffy stuff that they were going on with, it killed some stuff. But regardless, The Empire Strikes Back only brought in 55% of A New Hope's money, and it divided the audience. That's a thing that sometimes Star Wars does. Attack of the Clones brought in 59% of the Phantom Menace, and that one actually managed to bring the audience back around and recover somewhat from the abysmal Jar Jar Binks love fest that was an attempt to try and get us to sympathize with other races and other types of characters and overcome stereotypes. That was the ham-fisted politics of George Lucas's second outing. So where was I at? 59%. Attack of the Clones did not do as well as the Phantom Menace. It didn't, and neither did the third episode. That Revenge of the Sith thing really didn't get that high. Now, how disastrous was The Last Jedi? If we've got 55% for The Empire Strikes Back versus A New Hope, if we've got 59% for The Phantom Menace versus Attack of the Clones, what have we got as a percentage for The Last Jedi compared to what came before? To the terrible beginning, to a disastrous start on Star Wars by Kathleen Kennedy. It did 62.5% of The Force Awakens. 62.5%. That makes it the second best middle episode of a Star Wars film trilogy ever. It's the best performing second entry. It's a great middle act. I don't care if it hit a lot of the notes that the original trilogy did. That was somewhat in its favor. I don't care that it changed some of the politics. Star Wars was always a little bit interesting on its politics. It was definitely doing an anti-Vietnam, anti-American, superior ism thing in the Star Wars stuff. They were talking a little bit about colonialism in the original trilogy. There's some stuff in there that if you want to take issue with it, you can take issue with it. So I think we're being a little oversensitive here. Now, back in the day, we had some movies that were sidelines to the Star Wars project, and maybe George was trying to cash in. And these days, we've got some other movies that are sidelined to the Star Wars project, and maybe Kathleen Kennedy et al. Are trying to cash in. These days, we've got these things like Rogue One. Oh my goodness, don't get me started on Rogue One. And Solo, which we're trying to boycott so that we can teach these people at Star Wars who don't know what they're doing, this Kathleen Kennedy character, a lesson about how to treat fans. Right? Right? Right. That's what we got to do. We got to teach them how to treat their fans with some kind of respect. Well, these are actually really good movies. They're gifts. They're wonderful movies compared to the kind of stuff that was thrown at the audience, not caring about the audience or assuming that they knew what the audience was and what the audience wanted, pandering in a way to what they thought the audience was. It was an unmitigated shitstorm of live action stuff that has surrounded the original trilogy. We've got the Christmas special. Oh, let it never be mentioned again here on my channel, ever. The Caravan of Courage. That's that first Ewok movie, in case you didn't know. I had that on VHS. I recorded off of television when it came out, and I watched that to death. And as a kid, I loved it. I loved it. We've got a mac and cheese analogy coming up here because Alex Becker talked about it, a mac and cheese thing. We're going to get to that just one moment. And then Caravan of Courage was such an amazing success. The fans wanted it and loved it so much that good old George, he brought it back with the Battle for Endor, which I also had on VHS tape and watched to death as a little kid. These days, I can hardly look at that stuff. It was pandering, pure and simple. There was nothing about those movies that I today can consider redeeming. My tastes have changed and times have changed. And I don't think very many people looking back on them think they're great. I've never dared try to show it to my kids. They're far too old now at 16 and 13 to appreciate this stuff. That's where a lot of these toys come from. My toys, they got garage saled ages ago because I moved on from Star Wars. I outgrew it for a bit. I came back and I wanted to love it with some novels. And then I outgrew it again. And, now I'm a daddy. I like it like a daddy. That's how I like my Star Wars. And as a role-playing game aficionado. So there we go. Now, that live action stuff that came with the original Star Wars, that was your mac and cheese Star Wars, Alex Becker. That was your mac and cheese Star Wars. You want some of that back? Go ahead. Go back and you eat that mac and cheese Star Wars that is exactly what the fans wanted, that is pandering to bad taste. This latest run of movies has, for me, brought new life to a franchise that I pretty much gave up on with the prequel trilogy's awful, ham-fisted, dead political wallowing. It really tried to play politics. This stuff here, yeah, it's playing politics too, but it's also playing some pretty good action and fast-moving plots. The prequel trilogy's biggest sin was sitting on terrible politics like religion is dumb and maybe the Jedi aren't a religion after all, and being old and stodgy and conservative is dumb and people will take advantage of you. And that's kind of what it's hammering in over and over again. And yeah, Yoda's a great guy, but he was all stuck on the way the Jedi were supposed to be instead of, look, actually some of those messages are back again, aren't they? The more it changes, the more it stays the same. Speaking of change, you know what? Star Wars is changing. It's going to change. I look forward to the future of Star Wars that these movies have brought to me. And so do my sons. They like this stuff. They don't like the prequel trilogy. And maybe I've just brainwashed them to hate it over the years. Or maybe it's just genuinely bad junk. You, Alex Becker, now I'm talking to you directly. At 30, I think that's your age. At 30, you're already a cranky old man who hates change. Or when somebody says, maybe you're wrong about some stuff, you just go right off the handle because you just know how right you are. Changing Kathleen Kennedy won't fix your personal problems. If new Star Wars is made by anybody, Star Wars will change. Not even good old George Lucas could avoid the fact that Star Wars was going to change, whether he was doing it or whether somebody else did it. Being a control freak didn't fix anything. In the words of Octavia Butler, there's other science fiction other than Star Wars. Maybe you can get into that. You can go take an excursion to something else. I've got more Star Trek books than I have Star Wars books. You don't have to be a one-note science fiction fan. Anyhow, in the words of Octavia Butler, all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Star Wars is changing. Change is going to happen. Once again, this is from the loser who recorded Stephen Kavanaugh's Starfighters in the Sky for Peter Mayhew when he deigned to show up on the Force.net back in around 2000. And I've gone back to Stephen Kavanaugh's catalog a few more times since then, unless you think that's the one Star Warsy thing I ever did. I don't know if I'm going to leave this up. I don't know if you're going to make fun of me because I'm clearly some kind of an SJW. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I am. Maybe people like you are tipping me over into that camp because what I'm seeing over there is pretty darn ugly. And maybe it's divisive, but I don't think it's the Star Wars that's so divisive. I think there's two camps that are set up here that are divisive, and maybe it'll go back and maybe it won't. And maybe Star Wars has to choose a side because there's no walking a middle ground on it. Because that's change.